Nike was supposed to be untouchable. They built an empire on Jordan. They turned Kobe into an icon. They gave LeBron a $1 billion lifetime deal. For decades, if you were a hooper, the dream wasn't just to make the NBA. The dream was to sign with Nike, maybe earn a signature line, and cement your place in history alongside the GOATs. But that dream is starting to crack. Stars aren't chasing Nike anymore. They're leaving it behind. And not for Adidas, not Puma, and not for Under Armour. They're leaving for Chinese brands. Li-Ning, Anta, 361 Degrees, Peak. Names that used to be the punchline are now the future. Let's start with the most dramatic example, Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving walked away from Nike like a man who'd finally figured out the price of his own name. For years, he was one of Nike's crown jewels. The Kyrie line was everywhere, from playground courts to sneakerhead feeds. The Kyrie 1, 3, 5, these were performance shoes people trusted. The SpongeBob pack even cracked pop culture. But something broke behind the scenes. Creative control. Kyrie publicly complained that he had no say in the things being sold under his name. Imagine that. Your name on the box, but no actual authority over what's inside. He publicly trashed a shoe he said he didn't design. Tension built, and the relationship frayed. Then, after a controversial episode that led Nike to suspend ties, Kyrie didn't crawl back, beg, or quietly sign with another US giant. He pulled a move that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. He signed with Anta, a Chinese brand, and not just as an athlete. He signed on as Chief Creative Officer of Anta Basketball. Read that slowly. Nike wouldn't let him call the shots, but Anta handed him the keys. Suddenly, the narrative flipped. Here's a superstar who had proven he could sell millions of shoes globally, and instead of re-upping with an American heritage brand that controlled the narrative for decades, he chose power, ownership, and a seat at the executive table. His first Anta releases looked shockingly familiar. Clean Kyrie silhouettes, traction patterns, and design languages that could have slipped right out of his Nike era. But this time, Kyrie had the final say. Kyrie's story is the loud modern headline, but he's not an isolated case. Nikola Jokic, the Joker, the two-time MVP, the NBA champion who rewrote what a dominant center looks like, also walked away from the assumed path. Jokic wasn't a player who needed marketing theatrics. He didn't crave the hype machine. He wanted respect and a platform commensurate with his stature. Nike never gave him a true signature series, even as he stacked MVPs and a title. Instead of circling back to Nike, Adidas, or another US label, Jokic took his business to 361 Degrees, a Chinese sportswear brand that most American fans had barely heard of. That's seismic. A reigning MVP signing with a near anonymity brand in the US is not a late career money grab, it's a declaration. The old ladder doesn't lead where it used to. If Kyrie is the loud cultural example and Jokic is the legitimacy check from arguably the league's best player, then Dwayne Wade is the origin story, the godfather of the movement. The guy who didn't just prove the move was possible, he made it inevitable. Wade's path reads like a case study in risk and payoff. He started with Converse, produced the Wade 1 with its shark-inspired upper and Miami colorways, and for a minute, Converse looked alive in basketball again. Then, the Wade 4 reportedly tanked. Wade hated the way they felt and stopped wearing them in games. He jumped to Jordan brand, and for a stretch, he was literally lacing up flagship Air Jordans on court. An unheard of status for a younger star who'd come up in the 2000s. That seemed like the pinnacle. And then, he left. In 2012, Wade left the Jordan empire for Li-Ning, a Chinese company many in the US still treated like a joke. Why walk away from the Jordan name to sign with a relatively unknown Chinese label? Because Li-Ning offered Wade what Nike and Jordan didn't: ownership. Li-Ning gave him Way of Wade, a sub-brand under which he could sign incoming talent, influence design, recruit players, and build a legacy he actually owned. That was the watershed moment, when Wade doubled down, ultimately signing a lifetime deal. Other players started to rethink the script. this wasn't selling out, it was building out. Do you see a pattern here? Players are leaving Nike and Jordan brand. Before Wade, you have to understand the massive structural reason Chinese brands could even dream of competing. Yao Ming. When Yao arrived in the NBA in 2002 as a 7'6" #1 pick, he brought an audience that dwarfed the typical American market. Over 200 million people in China tuned into his early games. He became an instant cultural ambassador. David Stern in the NBA recognized the gateway and leaned into it. NBA China tours, CBA partnerships, turning China into not just a market, but a global stage. That globalization gave Chinese brands enormous leverage. When Li-Ning or Anta puts marketing dollars behind a player, they're not only selling in store, they're selling to a population the size of continents. The result? Chinese brands learned to do things differently and faster. They offered up better money at times, but more importantly, they offered what many American brands stopped prioritizing: genuine creative control, full signature lines, faster production cycles, and an actual platform for players who otherwise felt like a tiny logo in a giant corporation. Instead of signing a player and throwing a celebrity photo on a billboard, these brands built sub-brands, design teams, flagship stores, US reps, and grassroots basketball programs. They treated players like partners, not just faces. This isn't theoretical. Look at the roster of players who said yes. Klay Thompson signed with Anta and got his KT Signature Series, a 10-year extension reportedly worth up to $80 million by 2017. Anta took Klay seriously, marketed him globally, and helped push the KT line across Asia. Gordon Hayward also partnered with Anta. Hayward's GH series made him a face for the brand in a way he never was with the Big Three. Rajon Rondo wore Anta for years and became part of Anta's early basketball roster. And players like Andrew Wiggins and Lou Williams found homes with brands like Peak, which offered signature models and creative input they weren't getting stateside. CJ McCollum, another name we have to call out, joined Li-Ning. Li-Ning, who'd been steadily rebuilding its brand globally and leaning into basketball culture with Way of Wade and other lines. Evan Turner had stints with Li-Ning too. Matthew Dellavedova and Dwight Howard found fits with Peak, a brand that historically targeted players who didn't get the signature treatment from Nike but still wanted their own lines, their own logos, and their own fans. These aren't random journeyman deals, they're strategic placements. Peak gave Dwight Howard and Delly a platform. Li-Ning and Anta gave NBA stars not just a logo, but a lane to build identity. Why does this matter beyond the surface? Let's be blunt. For decades, signature models were the currency of basketball legacy. Jordan, Kobe, LeBron. But over the last decade, the majors started tightening who they elevated. Nike and Adidas consolidated, cut back on risky signature bets, and prioritized their inner circle of marketable talents. That left a long tail of players who were good to great, MVP caliber even, without an on-card signature shoe. Chinese brands saw an opening, sign those underappreciated stars, give them lines, marketing, and a real product that performs. Offer them a seat at the table versus a token colorway. And players responded. And it shows in the product and the numbers. Li-Ning's Way of Wade models went from quirky to cutting edge. Low profiles, modern cushioning, 808 style models with proprietary foam tech. They weren't knockoffs, they were modern hoop shoes engineered to compete. Anta had the KT and GH lines, 361 created a Jokic line, Peak produced signature Lou Williams and Dwight Howard models and marketed them. Casual hoopers who used to laugh at Chinese sneakers started posting TikToks and YouTube reviews. I tried Anta and it feels better than my Nikes. Former NBA players started admitting, on record and in interviews, that some of these Chinese models outperformed the American general releases they'd been given. From a business standpoint, China's market size is the obvious point. Billions of potential customers with a fast-growing appetite for basketball culture. But the strategic nuance is deeper. Chinese brands don't just chase US credibility, they build around Asia, where many of these NBA stars already have massive followings. A signature line in China can dwarf sales in the US for certain players. Li-Ning posted significant growth in their basketball category, and Anta climbed to be one of the biggest sportwear companies by market cap globally, being the 4th largest, only behind Nike, Adidas, and Puma. Those figures matter because they show these brands aren't just spending on talent, they're backing it up with product innovation, distribution, and most importantly, sales. And there's the cultural angle. For players who felt boxed in by the heritage brands, who wanted to control their image and build something that reflected their own identity, Chinese brands were offering an alternative story, more creative autonomy, more cultural exchange, and sometimes a deeper involvement in product direction. Kyrie's aesthetic on his Anta tongue, the way of Wade recruiting other players into their ecosystem, Jokic getting a signature line that Nike denied him, these are all examples of players being given creative currency they otherwise wouldn't get. Let's be clear, this movement isn't only for the biggest superstars, it's strategic at every level. Anta signed Clay and used him to prove that a non-Western brand could build a global basketball footprint. Li-Ning signed Dwayne Wade, and then Jimmy Butler got the JB1 and JB2. Butler reportedly took a pay cut to join Jordan brand, but never received a signature model there. But Li-Ning didn't wait. They launched a LeBron-sized marketing push for his line. Peak gave jobs and signature models to Andrew Wiggins and Lou Williams and targeted the everyman superstar who didn't have a lane in the US sneaker ecosystem. Even prospects got early looks. Anta and Li-Ning sign younger players before they're established, locking in long-term relationships. And the ripple effect is real. Players watch each other. Wade's move to Li-Ning in 2012 felt wild then. By 2018, he had a lifetime deal, and other stars started considering the route he'd taken. Jokic's signing with 361 sent a signal that even the NBA's top player could walk away from Nike and still be just as, if not more legit. Kyrie's elevation to CCO told athletes that it's possible to be taken seriously as a creative voice, not just an athlete paid to wear someone else's vision. The next wave of rookies is watching. The next generation, kids growing up idolizing Kyrie's handles or Jokic's passing, will look at the options and think, why should I build my identity into a brand that treats me like a number? Why not start where I can grow and own? So what's the real takeaway? This isn't a fad. It's an industry level shift. The old blueprint, play well, wait for Nike to call, is fraying. Li-Ning, Anta, 361, Peak, these brands are offering better deals in terms of agency, design input, and platform. They're not just offering money, they're offering narrative control and a chance to build something that resembles ownership. When the next generational prospect enters the draft, this conversation will be different. Imagine a top pick walking into the league and choosing Anta or Li-Ning from day one. Imagine a rookie launching a sub-brand with full creative input. What happens to Nike, to Jordan, to the assumption that you must get the swoosh to matter? The old ladder has been broken, and the new ladder looks different. It isn't built on legacy alone. It's built on partnership, ownership, and global strategy. Here's the provocative endgame. Chinese brands aren't trying to become Nike clones. They're trying to be something else. More collaborative, more player-driven, and unapologetically global. They want to own a broader basketball culture, not just the American slice of it. They're investing long-term in players, in product, and in markets that are already massive. For players, that's an irresistible pitch. For fans, it's a shift in where culture and commerce collide. So what should you do as a fan, a creator, or a player? Watch. Pay attention to the deals, but also pay attention to the product. Try the shoes. Read the backstories. Watch how the brands build narratives around players rather than trying to force-fit them into a pre-existing mold. The next time a superstar shows up on court in a non-Nike shoe, don't reflexively scoff. Ask why. There's almost always a reason deeper than money. Of course, this whole sneaker revolution doesn't just belong to NBA vets cashing checks and flexing their creative control. The next generation is already shaping the movement, and no name proves that louder than Young Hansen. Now, let's be honest. During the NBA draft, all eyes were locked on Cooper Flag. It was inevitable, right? Everybody knew he was going number 1 to Dallas, and the camera crews ate it up like they were filming the world's worst spoiler. The surprise that wasn't a surprise. But while Flag was the headline, something much more important, much more historic, was happening 15 picks later. Young Hansen, drafted 16th overall by the Portland Trail Blazers. And no, the news isn't that he was overlooked for the green room invite and had to stroll down from the stands like a fan who won a raffle. The real story is this. Young Hansen is the first Chinese-born player to enter the NBA already signed to a Chinese sneaker brand. Not Nike, not Adidas, not Jordan, Li-Ning. This is monumental. Think about it. Yao Ming, the godfather of Chinese basketball, played in Nike and then Reebok.
Yi Jianlian,
Nike.
Wang Zhizhe,
The first Chinese NBA player, Nike. For decades, Chinese athletes in the NBA didn't rock Chinese shoes. They wore the same swooshes and stripes as everyone else. Young Hansen just broke that streak. He's not just another player in the league. He's a cultural inflection point. He's repping China's own brand on the NBA's biggest stage, and Li-Ning knows exactly what this means. For years, they've been signing American players, Jimmy Butler, CJ McCollum, Fred VanVleet, D'Angelo Russell, and giving them signature lines that Nike and Adidas never would. But now they have a Chinese NBA player to build around. That's not just business, that's national pride. But here's where it gets wild. Even before he got drafted, Young had already signed with Li-Ning back in 2023. He entered the NBA as not just a player, but a brand ambassador, carrying China's premier sportswear company into a league that's been dominated for decades by Nike. That's unprecedented. Now, let's put this in context. Li-Ning currently sits with a 10.3% market share in China, trailing only Nike and Adidas. They're the number 1 local basketball brand in the country. But until Young, they didn't have a homegrown Chinese NBA player wearing their logo on the NBA floor. This is huge. For Chinese fans, Young isn't just a rookie, he's a national symbol. Every rebound, every dunk, every block, it's all happening in Li-Ning's shoes. And don't kid yourself, this all but guarantees he's getting a signature sneaker. This isn't just about the footwear, it's about history. When a Chinese player rocks Li-Ning on the NBA stage, it's more than a shoe, it's a cultural moment. It's the young one, and it's inevitable. Sure, some will scoff. Anybody gets a signature shoe these days. Maybe. But here's the difference. The market for Young isn't hypothetical. It already exists. China's nationalism is one of Li-Ning's cornerstones. A Chinese rookie in the NBA rocking Chinese shoes will have millions of loyal buyers ready on day one. He doesn't even have to be a superstar in the US to move serious numbers at home. And if he does break out, if Young Hansen becomes more than just a rotation big and grows into a star, that's when Li-Ning crosses another frontier. That's when their first Chinese NBA endorser becomes their most important signing since Wade. That's when the sneaker war stops being about breaking into the US and starts being about owning the globe. So, when you step back, the story writes itself. Wade showed it could be done, Clay proved it could succeed, Jokic legitimized it at the MVP level, Kyrie made it cultural, and now Young Hansen, China's own, carries it into the future. Do you see the pattern here? This isn't just about leaving Nike and Jordan brand anymore. This is about Chinese brands owning their narrative, their own stars, and their own history in the NBA. And Young Hansen is the proof that it's not only happening, it's already here.